Eric Dombach here at the Coach's Coach, and I want to welcome you to this next interview in the Million Dollar Business Coaching Firm interview series. And I have with me today Kelli Hoskins, a dear friend and client of mine. And Kelli, are you able to hear me okay?
I can, thanks, Eric.
Well, thank you so much for being on the firm, on this firm interview with me. And I'm really excited to have you on the call today because we're going to be talking about what it takes to sell a business coaching firm, which you've just done recently. So congratulations to you on that. And thanks for joining.
Thank you.
So let's get a little basic information out of the way for folks who may not know who you are. And so let's go back and look at the history. When did you actually start your business coaching practice? Tell us a little bit about how you got into the business coaching industry when you got started.
I invested in a business coaching franchise, a single unit franchise in April of 2005. I was working for a software development company at the time. I had been with that company for about 15 years. I'd considered going into business for myself, knew what I wanted in a business and what I wanted out of the business, and also where my skill set was. And when I came across the franchise opportunity, it just seemed to match what I was looking for. So I invested in a single unit, but I always had the intention of building a coaching business or a coaching firm because I really wanted the leverage that multiple coaches could provide for me.
Excellent, excellent. So April 2005, and here we are, quite a few years later. And your firm was built where? Where'd you build that?
I live in Minneapolis in Minnesota, and my firm was located about an hour north of the Twin Cities in a city called Coon Rapids, so just north of Minneapolis in Minnesota.
Excellent. Okay. Um, let's talk a little bit about the products and services that you sell, and then we'll talk a little bit about your revenue history, and then get into the firm building aspects of things. But what have been the main products or services that you sell as part of your business coaching firm?
The three main products was the one-to-one coaching or mentoring services where we work on a one-on-one basis directly with the business owners. In addition to that, and I separated this in my business as a separate stream of income, was the kickoff alignment consultations or positioning consultations for a new client, and then the group coaching program where we coach multiple business owners or did workshops for multiple business owners at a time over a series of months. So about 85% of my revenue came from the one-to-one coaching. About 5% came from the alignment consultations, and about 4% came from the group coaching, and then the remaining 5 to 6% was everything else, all the other miscellaneous products and services that we sold.
Beautiful, very nice revenue mix. Well done. And now let's talk a little bit about your revenue history. So you've been in the business for quite a while, 2005, and
Right.
here we are, some 7, 8 years later. Can you give us a sense of how your revenue ramped up year one, two, three? Just give us a sense of how that grew over time.
The first year, well, the first 2 years was just myself personally. So in the first year in business, I did a little over $200,000. In the second year in business, I did a little over $250,000, and again, that's my own personal production. The third year was 2008 when I brought on my 2008 into 2009 when I brought on my first coaches. We did just over $400,000 in the third year, up to $480,000 in the fourth year. The biggest year that we had in our business was 2011, and we did $655,000 in gross revenue in 2011, and that was with myself coaching part-time and then 3 full-time coaches.
Excellent. So yourself part-time and 3 full-time coaches. So 655,000, and again, not quite 4, but almost 4 coaches, and that's an average of right around 160,000 in revenue generated per coach, which is roughly just over 13, close to 14,000 per month per coach. And again, you were doing that part time, so very healthy, very respectable, and putting you, I'm sure, at the front of the pack in terms of revenue production um, for business coaches around the world. So well done, and
Thank you.
congratulations. So I got a couple more things just in terms of how you built the business. Um, what would be the main marketing methods that you've used over these years to get your coaching clients?
Um, we've dabbled in a lot of different marketing strategies and techniques over the years. Based on how I built my business, there were three main marketing methods that significantly and consistently produced results for us when it came to getting new clients. Started with networking. I built my business, and my coaches built their business with networking. From there, that led into strategic alliance opportunities, partnering with other B2B companies or associations where we did workshops or seminars or trainings on their behalf, and then thirdly through referrals. So those three marketing strategies produced 80% of our clients. We did invest in telemarketing on and off, and we did get results through telemarketing, so that would probably be the fourth lead generation strategy, but we found that wasn't working as consistently for us as networking, strategic alliances, and referrals.
Well, there's no doubt that getting clients from relationships, referrals, networking, and strategic partners, there's no doubt that that is the highest leverage way to do it. So well done. And yeah, that's just excellent. Let's talk a little bit about the fact that you brought on some coaches, and you had got to the point where you're banking $250,000 a year on your own, which is, I mean, that's really healthy. I mean, $250,000 a year on your own, that's in excess of $20,000 a month, and there were very, very healthy margins for you there, of course, after your expenses. So you're doing well, you're happy. Um, what was it that made you decide, okay, it's time to bring on an associate coach?
When I started my business, I started it with the intention of bringing on multiple coaches to build a business coaching firm. Um, the the timing really was twofold. Number one, I was getting a little bit of outside pressure from others in the business based on my own performance that it was time to look at adding coaches. And for me personally, it was just making a decision, I guess, like everything else in the business, that I had no real excuse for putting it off apart from my own fear and that I'd never done it before. So it really just, I didn't have any more excuses as to why now wasn't a good time to bring on a coach, given that was my ultimate goal, was to build the business and build the revenue by adding coaches. Um, the formula for change is one that I applied to myself to increase my dissatisfaction and my vision and make it easier to take those first steps. I was putting off investing in the licenses to add a coach until I found the coach. But what I found was that was going quite slowly. So I flipped it around and instead invested in the licenses, which put the pressure on me to find a coach. And so once I had the pressure and the financial commitment of the licenses, then I had no choice but to find the coach. And that was actually a really good decision for me, because it forced me to take the action that I was procrastinating around. And adding coaches was a great decision for me based on the ultimate result that I got from the coaching business. However, it didn't come without its challenges. So I worked through those. But yeah, that's really what put pressure on me to bring in my first coach. It was in line with my goals, and I put myself in a position where I couldn't procrastinate anymore.
Yeah, so I think you said this was in 2009 that you brought on your first coach. Is that right?
November 2008 was when I actually hired my first coach,
Okay,
but it took a couple of months to get them ramped up. So we started seeing the revenue and the clients coming in early 2009.
gotcha. So you began ramping up in 2009. It was in alignment with your goals for the firm from the beginning. And then um, again, you started your business as a business coach in 2005. So really, it took maybe a few years, 2006 and 7, and most of 2008, to get established on your own. So call it roughly 3 years to get established, learn the business, get yourself up to that $20,000 a month run rate, which is a very good living for any business coach. And then you finally just pull the trigger. You pulled the trigger, made some decisions that kind of forced your hand. And then you mentioned, you moved into the process that, like anybody doing this, brought some challenges that you had to move through. So let's talk about that. I mean, what were, the top one or two challenges that you face as you were bringing on your first associate coach? And again, I really appreciate you sharing. This is going to add a lot of value to the people that listen who are going to be doing the same thing. So what were some of those challenges?
Um, yeah, I think one of the things that I'd learnt early on in my coaching career, and some of it from you, Eric, as you shared with me, what you'd done as you built your firm, was cash flow in this business is king, and making sure that every decision I make is based on conserving cash flow. So I wanted to wait to bring on my first coach until I was at a point where I felt confident with the cash flow that I was bringing in, before I invested in bringing on my first coach. So definitely one of the challenges early on is just learning how to manage that cash flow with the investment in additional resources. In my case, the licenses, the royalties associated with those, the additional overhead from office space and resources required to support a new coach. So that was number one, is just learning how to make sure that I was managing cash flow and making sure that I wasn't bleeding cash, as I was building the business and getting the coach productive. Another challenge that I had is really not knowing who would succeed as a coach and who wouldn't. I found, because I have interviewed and brought in on a probationary period, like many coaches. I would suggest I've interviewed easily over 40 coaches, and I've brought over a dozen in on probationary period. And it was really surprising to me at how many on paper or at face value seemed like they had the skill and ability and the confidence and the runs on the board to succeed as a coach. But once they actually came into my business, that they really couldn't execute in this environment, because I find that the business coaching environment is a different environment to a consulting environment or to a corporate environment. And so I was surprised at the number of people that actually couldn't succeed in this environment, or it took them a long time to learn how to succeed in this environment. So that was a bit of a challenge for me, is how long it actually took to get a new coach productive, and those that I thought would succeed and didn't. I personally had a couple of challenges with dealing with coaches' egos, coaches that had been successful consultants or successful in corporate America, and a little bit older than me and coming into my business. I had some challenge with ego in not wanting to learn from me, or wanting to do it their own way, and not willing to learn the system and learn what succeeded from somebody who had already proven they knew how to apply coaching principles for success. And then for me personally, it was teaching somebody who thinks differently to me to succeed the way that I succeeded, because I knew how I'd been successful as a coach, and I found that sometimes I had challenges teaching that to a coach who thought a little bit differently to me. So I would say they're the big ones that I had to overcome in order to help coaches succeed in this business, and therefore help my firm to succeed.
That is just a treasure trove of experience that you shared there, and I appreciate so much what you've just said. But let's go back and unpack a couple of those. You mentioned that you interviewed over 40 coaches, and I just want to underscore the importance of that, what you just said. I know I find myself teaching this to firm building coaches almost on a weekly basis, that you've got to be prepared to interview dozens upon dozens of coaches. There are a lot of people out there that fancy themselves, a good candidate to be a good candidate to be a business coach, but then when push comes to shove, uh, many just can't make the grade. But over 40, and then over a dozen or maybe a dozen on a probationary basis came into your firm. Now, let's just talk about that for a minute. What do you believe it takes? I mean, what would be the characteristics of someone who has what it takes to be a great coach from what you've seen and learned?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. In fact, that's the $1 million question. And even the 40 that I interviewed, and I would consider, and that 40 were the ones I interviewed on a one-to-one basis. There were even more that I put through a group interview or a seminar process to narrow it down to the 40 that I interviewed on a one-on-one basis, and then to the dozen that I trialed in a probationary period, to the 5 that I actually ended up hiring. And even that to me wasn't enough, because there were a couple of coaches who didn't work out. So based on what I've learned though about business, I don't know that that's any different as to what it takes to hire superstars in any position in any business. You do need to go through. I mean, you need to become a recruitment business if you want to find the best people and do so consistently for any position. When it comes to what does it take to make a great coach, I think maybe what I'll do is share what I see causes coaches not to succeed, and then perhaps the opposite of that will contribute to what it takes to make a great coach. One of the things I've already mentioned is ego. I've really struggled with some coaches where ego has got in the way of their ability to succeed, and certainly myself, as I learned to succeed in this business, there are times where ego showed up for me as well. So I would suggest that a great coach has got to check their ego at the door, meaning that whatever they've done in the past doesn't mean or guarantee they're going to succeed in this environment, and even what they've done in the past may not apply in the same context in this environment, so you've got to be willing to adjust. And then secondly, from an ego standpoint, being coachable and being willing to learn and not getting distracted by thinking that you have to have all the answers all the time, and if you don't know it, then you're not a great coach. I find too many coaches that I've experienced aren't coachable, that aren't open to being influenced by others, and therefore get stuck in their ability to actually translate that to coaching and results they can get for clients. So being humble and not letting your ego get in the way of your goal and role would be one characteristic of a great coach, in my opinion. I've also seen coaches struggle because they didn't understand how operations tied into the numbers or the financial results of a business. For me personally, coaching is by the numbers, meaning that everything that you do in a business somehow has to tie back to a financial result. And ideally, we're an increase in the financial result, but sometimes a decrease, and you need to understand that. So I've seen coaches struggle where they were taking actions or coaching on activities in the business, but not dialed into how those actions or activities impacted the financial results of the business. And so things that they thought they were the right thing to do, they couldn't measure or quantify exactly how it impacted the business financially. So from my perspective, a coach needs to understand how to tie the operational actions or activities, and whether it's sales or marketing or business operations, they have to tie it into the financial results for the business and know what drives those. I think too, where I've seen coaches struggle is being specialists and not generalists, and focusing solely on what they're good at and leaving other areas of the business that they're maybe not so confident in or not so skilled at, and ignoring those areas of the business. So while they might be getting great results in one area, they're not expanding their focus to all aspects of the business, and they're not focusing on multiple areas of the business in order to get results. So there are a few big things that stand out for me. And I would say, finally, not willing to continue to learn and grow as a coach or as in their own personal development. You get to a point where you've shared everything that you know about business, and when you run out of things that you know, then you're redundant to a client. So that ties into not just the operational knowledge about a business, but also a coach's own personal vision and their own personal results. I've seen coaches lose clients when the coach has exceeded the client. The client has exceeded the coach's skills, or the client's vision for themselves has exceeded the coach's vision for themselves, and again, the coach becomes redundant. So there are a few of the I guess challenges I've seen. So the opposite of that, in my opinion, helps contribute to a great coach.
Such good information, Kelli, and definitely, obviously, born of a lot of years in the trenches, bringing people into your firm and working to make them productive and successful as business coaches. And there's a couple things that stand out. As I was listening to your list, I was thinking about the three qualifications that I've been teaching for years. And the one is, having the right psychometric profile, which is basically a different way of saying this person has to have the right attitude, but more importantly, the right behavior patterns. And you kind of touched on some similar themes there when you talked about the importance of humility, the good old-fashioned word, being humble, coachable, teachable, checking you out the door. You also talked about the importance of a willingness to learn and grow. But these are all kind of psychological characteristics or behavior patterns and traits that can be measured with psychometric profiles. And you really touched on the importance of some of these intangibles. One of the second thing on my list that I've taught for years and is in my book, $1 Million Business Coaching Firm, we talk about this extensively, is the importance of coaches knowing, really understanding business operations in total. And you talked about that. You talked about coaches being specialists versus generalists and being comfortable with certain areas and then ignoring other areas of the business and how that gets them into trouble. You talked about coaching by the numbers, financial results. And so, just so important for coaches to understand all the facets of business, not just one particular area of specialization, be it HR, marketing, or whatever. But there's one other thing we talked about in the book, and I've talked about, and that is the importance of coaches having and coming into this industry with an ability, or preferably a strong background and skill set in sales, so they can close the deal. And I'm wondering, can you reflect on that? How important is that, and what has your experience taught you on that front?
Sure. That's actually one of the biggest challenges I personally had coming into this business, and one that I had to seek out specific skills and training in order to overcome. And based on that, I spent a lot of time coaching what I've learned to my coaches to help them get over that same hurdle. No matter how good you are at coaching, if you're not able to get a client to buy into you as a coach, both who you are as a coach and what you can do for them as their coach, then you never get the opportunity to actually, deliver on those results. So absolutely, the ability to convert prospects into coaching clients is a critical part, and therefore the sales skills necessary to do that is a critical part. I was never in a direct sales role in any of my previous positions, so while I didn't have any skills related to the sales process. Now, it turns out that I had sales skills that I was able to apply in this environment, but I didn't know at the time that I had sales skills, or it was a selling skill. So that was one of the biggest things that I had to learn, and I had to learn that from a number of perspectives. First of all, just understanding what it was that I was actually selling, because I thought I was selling business coaching services, but that's not what I was selling. I was selling a certain result or outcome that a client wanted to accomplish, and I was also selling my own style in helping them reach that, or influencing their ability to reach that result or outcome. And so I didn't understand that at first, and it wasn't until I understood that I was able to improve my ability to bring on new clients. Secondly, that coaching is an intangible, and they can't touch it or feel it, which means that what you're selling is a vision or a possibility. Or what I had to learn how to sell was a vision or a possibility. And that I had to make that as real as possible to the clients that I was sitting across from, so that I could make it as tangible or as feasible as I could, given that they couldn't actually reach out and touch it. So that was something else that I had to learn. And the third thing that I had to learn, which I think was probably the most difficult for me, was that I had to sell based on emotion. And I'm a very logical thinker. And so to go from a place of, well, if it makes logical sense, then you should just do it. To go from a place of logical decision making to have to come from a place of tapping into the emotional reason why a client needs to do something different in their business, and why they need to hire a business coach to help influence that. That was a big change for me, and that was very uncomfortable for me to go to that emotional place and have those emotional conversations. And so I had to learn all of those different skills in order to be able to have the conversations I needed to have, so that prospects would buy me as their coach. But learning those skills ultimately made me a better coach as well, because then it just increased my ability to deliver on it.
Fantastic. Now, given what you had to learn personally to be successful selling, particularly selling emotionally and so forth, how important is it to hire coaches who have some capability or background in or propensity for this critical part of the business? And if you had to do it all over again, I mean, you've done a great job, but if you had to do it all over again, what? And so what would you recommend in the area of hiring coaches who bring something to the table from day one, really, in that area?
From my own experience, having a coach having the skills to be able to have emotional conversations and connect with people emotionally is critical in this business. However, in my experience, it also then has to translate to ability to get tangible physical results in the business. I also see some coaches who get too tied up in the emotional side of coaching and don't translate it to tangible results. So there has to be a combination of both. But in my opinion, unless a coach can connect with a client emotionally, it's more difficult for a client to buy that coach. And even more importantly, it's more difficult for a coach to retain a client, especially when things don't go according to plan, in the first few months of coaching. And if you're relying on the tangible results or the logical decision-making process, and that's not being translated, then without that emotional connection, it makes it even more difficult to retain a client. So to me, that ability to view coaching and the relationship as an emotional connection versus logical is critical to success. I actually interviewed a coach once who was telling me about his sales experience, and one of the questions that I asked him was a deal that he didn't close, and why didn't he close that deal? And the coach told me the story, and at the end he said to me, "There's not one logical reason that I could come up with as to why the client wouldn't buy from me." And I just said to him, "You just answered your own question right there. You just said there wasn't a logical reason. There probably wasn't. There obviously was an emotional one." So that was a pretty big indicator to me that this coach probably wasn't going to be able to translate those skills and experience into this business.
Wow, such important insights. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Very impressive. And let's think a little bit about the recruiting process. You
Mm-hmm.
just shared with me and our listeners the things that you've learned about the qualities of the kind of coach that is going to work out best for you. you got people then, and I think you mentioned you did a group interview process. Can you say
Hmm.
anything about how you moved people through your interview process? You move them through that group interview and then into interviews, and so what did that process look like, and how did that help you figure out which people were right for you?
Um, the group interview process, Coach leads came to me from a number of different sources. I advertised in some of the most common online job sites. I had referrals. I promoted the coaching opportunities at any of the workshops events that I did. I ran ads in the newspaper. I even recruited recruitment firms to help source coach leads for me. So I sourced leads from multiple different sources. And then a number of my clients also applied for the coaching opportunity once I'd coached them to a point where their business was running without them. So lots of different lead sources. The group interview process was twofold. One was introducing the business and the opportunity and sharing what the coaching position and what the coaching opportunity was and what I was looking for in a coach. And then the second part of the interview was asking between 6 and 8 key questions to try to drill down as best as I could who in the room had the characteristics that could meet those requirements as a coach. So look, sometimes I hit, sometimes I missed. I had coaches that came through that ultimately succeeded, based on that interviewing process. I had coaches that once I actually got them to do the practical side of the business, they couldn't deliver. So I wouldn't say it was foolproof, but for some of, I would suggest every coach that I brought into the business from a for a probationary period standpoint, even though there might have been some red flags, I knew in advance what those red flags were based on the interview process to determine whether they were really going to be a constraint once they got to execute the coaching or the business development and coaching process. So once I'd narrowed those prospects down to a short list, then I would interview them one on one, and my coaches would also interview them on a one-on-one basis. And I took my existing coaches. I actually took a lot of feedback from them for a couple of reasons. Number one was they saw things that maybe I didn't see, and also, they were going to have to work with them on the team, and so I needed to feel confident that not only could this person execute the skills necessary to succeed as a coach, but they would become a valuable member of the team and add value to the team as well as being able to get results with clients. And then for those that made it through the one-on-one interview process, I then, as well as doing the reference checking, I had dinner with their spouses or their significant partners. Got a little bit more insight in a more social environment, got a little bit of feedback from the spouse, and it's really important, in my opinion, in this business that the spouse or partner supports them in this coaching business, because this can be a difficult and emotional roller coaster, and so if you don't have support from home, then it makes it even more difficult to succeed in this business. So once we went through that, then I would bring them in for a 90-day probationary period. I made the mistake of letting some coaches go for too long. I even made the mistake of hiring coaches that they didn't fulfill all the requirements of the probationary period, but I thought that I was being too harsh, and maybe, after 6 months in the business or 12 months in the business, they'd overcome it. That was a big lesson to me, is that if they can't deliver in the first 30, 60, 90 days, it's unlikely they're going to be able to deliver in 6 months or 12 months. And every coach that I hired, even though every coach that I hired, even though they didn't meet the requirements in the probationary period, I ended up letting go because it never got better.
That's an important lesson right there. If it's not happening in the first 90 days, it's just not going to happen. So that is really excellent. And one of the questions that comes to mind is, how did you limit the risk to the business itself, your business, during that probationary period? Risk to your clients, risk to your reputation. How did you limit the risk?
I made the personal decision to bring on my coaches as contractors for the first 90 days, which means they weren't technically employed by me for the first 90 days. So it was more of an association than a direct employer-employee relationship. They were brought on in a business development role, not a coaching role, which meant their primary responsibility was to generate leads for the business and to bring relationships to the business. And that could be client relationships, that could be strategic alliance partner relationships, that could be associate relationships. So their number one job in the first 90 days was to cultivate relationships and bring relationships to the firm. Given this is a relationship-based business, if they're not able to cultivate relationships in the first 90 days, it's unlikely they're going to be able to do that beyond the first 90 days. So they didn't cope, they participated in workshops. They were given small segments of workshops to deliver where it was consistent with the skills that they already brought to the table. So if I had somebody who had skills in sales, then they would participate in workshops by sharing a specific learning or technique relative to the skills that they brought to the business. They didn't coach clients on a direct basis in that first 90 days, but they did participate by listening into the coaching sessions with permission of the clients, of course.
Excellent. Very nice and very well done. So let's transition slightly now. You finally reached the point where you were wanting to sell, and so let's talk a little bit about who you sold the firm to, when you sold it, and for how much, and so forth. Unpack the sale for us here.
Sure. Again, I went into this business with the intention of not only building a firm that would leverage my income and leverage my time, but also one that would be a saleable asset one day. I think two things. Number one is I had no reason to believe it wouldn't be a saleable asset, so I didn't have any negative perceptions about why it might be difficult to sell a coaching business or why I wouldn't be able to sell a coaching business. I think that helped me work through some of the challenges that I experienced along the way. But I did recognize that it was up to me to, first of all, build a business that was attractive to somebody, for somebody to buy, and then as I was building the business, make sure that I had an idea of who would be a viable buyer as I was building the business. So if those potential buyers came along, then I could cultivate those relationships. There's I had a number of considerations as to who might be an ultimate buyer of the business. Just based on the learnings that I'd had as a coach building a firm, certainly existing coaches was one viable possibility and opportunity. But I also had relationships with a couple of strategic alliance partners, particularly accounting firms, where buying my firm could actually have added revenue to that business straight away without necessarily adding a lot of overhead to that business. It would have created immediate cash flow for that business. And given firms like accounting firms already have a pool of potential clients for that business, that could automatically increase the possibility for bringing on new clients and new business and increasing cash flow significantly after the sale. So alliances like that were a consideration for me. And while I didn't have any direct relationships, other training companies, whether they were sales training companies or marketing training companies, also could have been potential buyers for my business. So I was entertaining any or all of those possibilities. I actually didn't make the direct decision to sell my business when we started conversations about selling my business. I'd actually made a personal decision that I was going to spend less time building the business coaching firm and spend more time in investing in other businesses and helping grow other businesses outside the business coaching firm. And so I just decided that while the business was still going to continue and I would still invest time in the business, the growth strategies would be focused on other businesses. My coaches at the time while they understood what my goals and intentions were for myself and my overall business enterprises, they felt a little bit abandoned, that I wouldn't be spending as much time building the business coaching firm as I would be building other businesses. So they actually approached me and asked me if I would consider alternatives that would make it more viable for them if I was going to spend less time in the business coaching business. And so I was open to any possibility that would enable me to pursue the path that I wanted to pursue. So we started conversations and looked at variations of them fulfilling more of a management role rather than just a coaching role, and then increasing their income, them potentially buying into the firm and being a percentage owner at the end of the day, based on what their personal goals were and what my personal goals were. I negotiated with the two coaches that at the end of the day, selling to them outright was going to be the best decision for me, and it also helped them achieve their goals, because they wanted to continue to build the firm and they saw possibilities for themselves in continuing to build the business. So once we agreed that selling to them outright was going to be the right decision, then we started negotiating terms. So that we started those conversations about June of last year, so June of 2012. It took 6 months for us to kind of work through the details and the terms and agree to a price and agree to payment terms that would work for me and work for them. The sale of my business was certainly influenced by the franchisor, because we have multiple stakeholders in a franchise organization. There's obviously me as the owner, there's the new buyer. In our case, there's a master licensee who's responsible for the territory, then there's the franchisor themselves. It got a little bit involved in having to keep all the stakeholders happy as we went through the negotiation process. But at the end of the day, we came to an agreement which saw me double my original investment in the coaching licenses themselves, which was the capital cost to buy the licenses. And those terms are paid a flat fee, monthly flat fee over the next 3 years, which is comfortable for me, because I'm still coaching and earning income as a coach. Plus, I get supplemented by the payments for the firm, and the coaches are comfortable with that, because it's a number that they can comfortably cash flow, because given that I'm financing the deal, there's no point in making the payment something that straps the cash flow of the new owners or the coaches, so that they end up going out of business and can't pay me. So the most important thing was making sure that I got a number that represented the value of the firm, but also could be cash flowed over a reasonable period of time, so that I ended up getting paid the full value of the investment.
That is really excellent, and it's worth saying congratulations for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which, though, is a very smooth transaction. I remember a business transfer professional one time telling me that selling business is a bit like having a baby. You can count on at least 9 months of a lot of kind of grueling work trying to corral all the stakeholders to a good conclusion, and you got it done in 6 months, which is
Oh, actually, no, Eric, we did. It was 9 months before the deal closed. We came to the terms within 6 months, and then it took 3 months to actually then execute everything. So yeah, the negotiations took 6 months, and then another 3 months to actually execute the sale once the negotiation. So that 9 month time frame is actually pretty reasonable.
that's kind of funny, isn't it? But yeah. So in 9 months to get the deal done, congratulations. And I I like what you said. You doubled your original capital costs, and you set it up as a seller finance deal, so you were able to take a flat fee over a 3-year period to get the value, and you were careful to construct it in a way that didn't tax the cash flow of the business, so you could get the value out. So congratulations on that. And
Correct. Thank you.
yeah, that's just wonderful. So anything else you want to share about the way the deal was structured, or maybe the biggest challenge in the negotiation process as you were working through it?
Um, I think for me, For me, I think what made it easier was that when I started the business, I always had a vision of selling it. So as I grew the business, I was mindful of decisions that could impact either the value of a business if I was to sell it, or who was a viable buyer for that business. So for me, I think that was really helpful, that as I grew the business, the decisions I made were not just consistent with what the immediate needs of the business were, but knowing that it was always my intention to have a viable asset that I could sell one day. So that was helpful. Certainly learning from experiences from coaches who had gone before me. I received a lot of value from coaches such as yourself and other coaches in the business who had done things right as they sold their business, and who had also made mistakes as they sold their business. So I was very conscientious of learning from other coaches who had done what I was planning to do before me, so that I could do more of what they did well, and avoid some of the mistakes or pitfalls that maybe they'd made. And that served me well through the process as well, because I was well prepared for both some of the opportunities and some of the roadblocks that appeared during the negotiation and the sales process. I was also very smart to have solid contracts in place, contracts with the franchisor, contracts with my coaches, contracts with my clients, and those contracts really protected me through this negotiation process. Had I not had solid contracts in place, then it would have undermined the value of my business, and therefore the opportunity that I had to sell my business. So whatever you can validate or solidify in your business via contracts that are non-negotiable will add to the value of your business, because as soon as somebody can can defy a contract, then it really reduces the value in the business. And then for me, it was knowing who all the key stakeholders were, and understanding two things. First of all, what they really needed out of the deal, so that I could work to give them what they really needed, and also knowing that I had to also, while I had to work with them, I also had to be wary of them, and so it was just balancing working towards the objective that the other stakeholders wanted, but at the same time knowing that they were their own independent entity and they still wanted what they needed, and so and just managing those perspectives through the deal. I think all of those things helped me to get the win. Well, not just for myself, but for all the stakeholders involved. And at the end of the day, we all won from this deal.
That's so amazing. And, I think probably the last main question I want to ask you here is you've kind of already alluded to. You said that you did some important things along the way because you were planning to sell the business from day one. And so, what words of advice would you have for business coaches as they're building their business with an eye to sell it? What are a couple words of advice, things you did well to get that business ready and build it in a way that would get it ready for sale?
I think I already just mentioned the contracts. So making sure wherever it's feasible and viable that you have contracts that guarantee the revenue and the cash flow of your business, whether they're contracts with your customers, whether they're contracts with your key employees who are the revenue generators for your business, whether they're contracts that you've negotiated with vendors and suppliers. First of all, making sure that you have key contracts in place for anything that could impact the revenue, the cash flow, and therefore the overall value of your business. Because if you're trying to sell your business, the last thing that you want is one of your key employees leaving and taking customers with them. That was one of the biggest threats to my business, and I think to many professional services businesses, is where an existing employee or contractor can take revenue and take clients because you don't have the appropriate agreements in place. So that would be one. The second thing is managing profitability and managing cash flow so that the business has a proven history of being profitable and having positive cash flow based on the systems that you've used to run the business. Because the key to a successful sale is for the new owners to be able to continue to guarantee that profitability and guarantee that cash flow. So anything where you can tie your expenses and your costs directly to your revenue and show a history of consistent profitability and consistent cash flow is really important. For me, it was always being mindful as to who could potentially buy my business, and not just limiting my options, because I believe if I was just limited to one option for who I could sell my business to or who would find my business valuable, that would really reduce the negotiating power that I had. So having multiple potential buyers or categories of buyers, which meant if one buyer didn't work out, then I wasn't stuck with the business. I could go to other buyers. I think that's important. So that's something that I think was critical to my success, and I think anyone who's building a firm should be mindful of. And what else? I think they're probably the big ones, Eric.
Well, those are really good ones. Contracts, managing the profitability to show that history of profitability, and then having a number of options for buyers in mind. Just really great advice. So, you've doubled your money, the investment capital that you put in the business. The amount of money that's coming to you as a guaranteed payment of the next 3 years is actually, I'll say this out loud and publicly, the amount of money that you're bringing out of the that you're receiving on a monthly basis is more than many people make, having a job. So it's almost as if the cash flow stream that you got over the next few years is like, having another job or something. So you've done very, very well for yourself. And I'm really proud to know you, proud to be your friend, proud to have been with you on the journey at various points along the way. So congratulations to you and your husband and your family. And really appreciate your time and your willingness to serve and give back. So, and any final thoughts before we sign off?
I think for anybody who's choosing to build a business of any kind, you really need to be clear on what your why is, so that your decisions that you make along the way are consistent with your why, and that when challenges show up that can challenge your resolve, that you're going to work through those challenges to deliver on your why. And for me, the why was twofold. Being from Australia and living and coaching in the United States meant that I needed the cash and the time leverage to travel back and forth to Australia, and building the business coaching firm enabled me to do that for at least once a year for the last 8 years, and even to the point where last year through January, February, and March, I was able to spend 3 months of the year last year in Australia with my family. And then secondly, being able to take care of my family and spend more time with my son. So those two whys were non-negotiable for me.
That is so excellent. The importance of knowing why you're doing this and the lifestyle that you want and all that. So again, congratulations. Thank you for the encouragement that your story is for others on our call. And again, thank you, Kelli.
Thanks, Eric.